Welcome to the STAAR Testing Administrator Training. We're going to talk about STAAR, another test. I'll show you the testing calendar, what your role as a testing administrator is, some of the procedures and materials for testing, what it means to monitor testing, what you should do after the test, and how accommodations and oral administration will be handled. And if you guys have any questions, you can reach out directly. So first, this is the schedule for the STAAR test. You'll see that the bottom EOC is where is what's relevant to us. Here's the testing calendar. Please ignore that it says 2010-2011. So we will have our first round of administration on March 31st and April 1st. English 1 will be March 31st, English 2 will be April 1st. Then in May we'll have Algebra 1 on May 5th, Biology May 6th, and U.S. History on May 7th. This is when students will be able to retake the tests if they missed it the first time. And then we have our retakes, so for students that don't pass it or for some reason miss both the July and May or April administration, this will be when they have the opportunity to retake the test next year. So here's the testing procedures for all. Start and stop times. The time period starts when the test administrator finishes reading the directions and students are told to begin. Biology, Algebra 1, U.S. History will be 4-hour exams. English 1 and English 2, so this first round of administration will be 5-hour exams. The start and stop time needs to be recorded on the seating chart, which I will provide for you guys, and students have to record all their answers before the time period ends, at which point the test administrator needs to tell students to put their pencils down and close their test booklets. Directions from the test booklet need to be read out loud to students, and these are not included in the time limit. The time limit starts after the test administrator has read all the directions and students are told to begin working on their tests. It's important that we announce the time left to the test. You guys will get laminated sheets that have these times on there. It should be from 5 hours up until time's up, and those are the increments that they need to be told to students. Again, this is to ensure that students across the state of Texas are receiving the same exact type of testing environment. If a student arrives late, I will decide whether or not the student has time to complete the test that day. If they do, the student needs to be allowed the same amount of time. So for the 4 or 5 hours, they need to be kept aware of the time they have left in the same manner that other students are being kept aware of the time that they have left. So breaks are allowed. They're not mandatory. Some of them are included in the time limit. Others allow test administrators to stop the testing time for the group or for a specific student. During breaks, students must not discuss this content of the test, and test booklets need to be closed with the answer documents inside. The best way to ensure that this happens is to make sure that you continue to have a silent room during breaks. There are 2 ways to clarify breaks. First, there's the ones where the time continues to tick. This is if a student needs to leave to get some water or to bathroom or wants to eat a snack break. Students can take short physical or mental breaks so they can put their head down for a minute or so. They shouldn't fall asleep, so do not let students fall asleep, but they can take a quick mental break if they'd like to. During this time, the clock does not stop ticking. Then there are the breaks where the time does stop. This is lunch, if there's an emergency situation, if we need to consolidate students and move them to a new testing environment, if there's a medical break. So this is an example of something that would be for an individual student. During this time, the time is stopped and restarted when students begin working again. If that does happen, it needs to be documented on the seating chart. If a student needs to leave to the nurse, again, the clock stops for them. This needs to be documented on the seating chart. and the student will restart once they return. If this does happen, please inform me and make sure that I know, so that I set up some type of environment for them to continue working when they return from the nurse. If there's an emergency situation, please contact me immediately. If a student has to leave your classroom, remember that no testing material can be taken from the room, so they just need to leave. If a student returns to the classroom, I will determine whether or not it's okay for them to continue with testing. And if they can't continue with testing, I'll take care of the coding of the answer document and so forth. If there's a school emergency, we're going to follow the normal protocols. Remember, safety first. We're going to follow the same campus regulations for exiting the building. I will inform you guys what we need to do after the emergency situation is over. Contact me during that time if you guys have any questions. So during lunch, students can stop testing to take a supervised lunch. I hope to set up the schedule so that students can go back to lunch the normal way, and so that we don't have any lunch happening in our classrooms or things like that. But if there is a situation we're going to need to do that, the testing time is stopped for the lunch break and restarts when students resume taking the test. These times need to be recorded on the test booklet, and while they're eating their lunch, answer documents need to be stuck inside the test booklets, and everything needs to be collected. So they cannot leave it out on their desk while they're eating lunch. It needs to be collected and put away while they're eating. And there needs to be active monitoring during this time, and students should be silent during the lunch break. So we may have multiple test sessions. I don't see that happening because because the schedule is set up so that there's only one test a day. There might not be multiple test sessions. However, in May there will be some overlap with AP testing, and Mayla and I will get together to figure out exactly how that's going to look. This is accommodations. There are type 1 accommodations and type 2 accommodations. Let's go over those. So type 1 is for students who have a specific need and who are routinely using that type of accommodation in their classroom. So there is no ARF required, which is an accommodation request form. However, a type 2 requires an ARF, and that needs to be submitted. ART, 504, RTI, and or LPAC must be included in these types of decisions. If a student meets eligibility criteria and is allowed accommodations during a testing, this needs to be indicated on the answer document at the time of testing. I will ensure that that is done. If there's an unexpected emergency and the student needs to have some type of accommodation, please reach out to me. I will follow up with TEA and see if we can give them the accommodation. So this, for example, would be a student that breaks their arm the day before testing, and so now needs somebody to transcribe the material for them or something along those lines. If that's the case, reach out to me and I'll follow up with TEA and our district coordinator, see what we can do to best serve the student. So this is just information about ELL students. This won't specifically impact your testing administration. Again, just take a second to read the accommodations, linguistic accommodations for ELLs. If you're wondering why these types of accommodations are provided for ELLs, it's because we want to decrease the language barrier that ELLs experience when they're learning and demonstrating knowledge and skills in English. This is for students that are taking STAAR, STAAR L, and STAAR Modified. These are some of the ELL accommodations that could be provided. You'll notice that a bilingual dictionary is not supplied for English 1 or English 2, so these won't be part of our first testing administration. So students that are testing with accommodations will be in another room. Most of our students receive small group testing, and so those types of conversations I'll have specifically with test administrators that are going to be handling the types of accommodations that our students will need. There's extended time accommodations, and that could include extra time or extra day. Again, students that receive that type of information I'll directly communicate with the proctors for those. Extra time on the same day allows students to start at the beginning of the school day, but they're allowed to test until the end of the scheduled school day, so they have longer than the 4 or 5 hours allotted. Extra day accommodation allows a student to test over multiple days rather than just the one day. These are allowable test administrator procedures and materials. So students can read the test out loud to themselves if they need to. They can read aloud the writing prompt. They can have things to minimize distractions, such as the stress ball or noise reducing headphones. They can use colored overlays or magnifying devices, highlighters, scratch paper. There's individual and small group administration. You can remind students. If a student is taking STAAR L, they should not be in a room with STAAR or STAAR Modified assessments. So if for some reason you have that type of situation in your room, which should not happen, please inform me. Don't just allow the student to take the test in the room. And small group and individual administrations are important for our students, and so they'll be receiving that in the separate classrooms. If you see a student that is supposed to have small group administration, or you are concerned and think that they're supposed to, please reach out to me. Don't just have them continue testing in your test. If you have any questions about how students have been grouped, if something looks odd to you, or you're wondering why a specific student is in your room and you think they should be someplace else, please reach out to me. These are the ways that students should be grouped. Test security, make sure you go through the test security PowerPoint so that you know the do's and don'ts during testing. In that PowerPoint, you'll see some of the consequences for not maintaining test security. Remember that when you sign the oath, you're attesting to having read the security PowerPoint. Also, please read it thoroughly. It's important that we provide our students with a very comfortable testing environment. So it needs to be well lit. There needs to be quiet and comfortable. They need to have enough space to work, and they should also be sufficiently separated from other students. So there has to be one test administrator for every student. I'll provide you guys with the testing please do not disturb sign. Please make sure that's placed outside of your room. Any type of instructional displays need to be covered or removed during testing. A clock needs to be in the test room so students can keep track of their time. It's important that we complete the seating chart, and if you for some reason don't have one of those in your bin, please let me know so that I make sure to provide it to you. On the seating chart, make sure you include the name of all test administrators and monitors that were involved in the session. As a testing administrator, these are some of your responsibilities. The one that you guys need to worry about is the second here, which is to revise testing roster to ensure students are in their appropriate place. If you are concerned or worried or think that a student is not where they belong, Please let me know if you see your roster doesn't match the students in your room. Let me know, and so that I can figure out and make sure that the student is in the right location. It's also a responsibility to monitor testing. So you must be present during the entire test administration. It should be you and no more than 30 students in the room. If I've somehow assigned you to more than 30 students, please let me know as well. You need to make sure that all desks are clear of books and that all other materials are pushed to the side. When students enter the room, they should leave their backpack and all their belongings at the back of the room. Cell phones and other personal electronic devices are not allowed during testing. If a cell phone or something like that goes off during testing, have the student close their test booklet, put the answer sheet in it, and immediately let me know by hanging the sign outside of your door. Make sure that you're actively monitoring. This means that you're confirming that students are working at the right place, that they're filling in the answer sheet correctly, that they have only the allowable materials, that they're using the correct section on their answer document, that they're not communicating with other students, they're not using a cell phone, so forth. All of those things. It is okay for you to push students to stay on task. So if a student falls asleep or is just not doing the work or something like that, it is okay to encourage them to stay on task and to complete the test. Students are only allowed to answer or to erase stray marks or darken answer choices, and this can only happen during the time period that the test is ongoing. Students should be reminded periodically to record their responses on their scoreable documents. Remember, the things that are in test booklets will not be scored, and it has to be done within the time period. You can say, remember that you must record your responses on the answer document. Be sure to erase any stray marks that you might have accidentally made on your answer document. But you cannot talk specifically about an individual test item or response, or even viewing it is something that you should not be doing. Reinforcing, reviewing for, and or distributing testing strategies is prohibited. So even trying to give a student some type of strategy to do better on the test or something like that should not be done. Students need to take the test independently and silently. Students are supposed to remain in their seat during testing and should not talk to one another. They're also not allowed to work on any other area in the test booklet, so only the specific test section that they're on at that moment. And then it's important that as a test administrator we communicate the time left in 1 hour intervals, and then in the shorter intervals during the last hour, which we once time limit has ended, students cannot record their answers. That's why it's important we remind them throughout the testing to record their answers on the answer document. We will not be using large print or braille, so that is not relevant to us. Students are allowed 4 hours to take the test. If a student arrives late and there's still time in the day for them to complete the test, we will provide them with those 4 hours. And again, it's important that that timing is recorded on the seating chart. Students that need extra time or extra day will be provided that accommodation. This accommodation is not relevant for our campus. However, there are students that are receiving a lot of accommodations, and those things will be prepared before testing begins, and I will have a talk with the administrators that will be responsible for handling those accommodations. Seating charts are extremely important because these need to be turned in with every test session. It needs to include the name of students testing and the location of the room. All test administrator names and monitors involved in the test session need to be included on the seating chart. If students are moved to another room, a seating chart for that new location needs to be created. And the time limit needs to be adhered to. Seating charts need to include the start and stop time for each session, And if a student walks in late and they get a different start time, that needs to also be accounted for. If there are breaks that require the time to stop, those also need to be accounted for on the seating chart. Students should receive 2 number 2 pencils. They should not be using any mechanical pencils, and that's because a lot of times that lead is not number 2. They'll receive 1 test booklet, 1 answer document, and if the test administrator needs a test booklet, so for example oral administration, they will receive a test booklet as well. English clarification guide will be provided if applicable. It is not going to be necessary during our classroom administration. And then dictionaries will be provided for students for the English, for the writing and reading administration of the English 1 and English 2 exams. For Algebra 1 and Biology, calculators will be provided, and if there are any additional TA authorized materials that are required, those will be provided for students as well. Students can be provided dictionaries by the school, or they can bring them from home. There should be 1 dictionary for every 5 students, although we are going to shoot for 1 for every 3. The types of dictionaries are allowed are a standard dictionary in English or a dictionary thesaurus combination. Bilingual dictionaries are allowed, ESL dictionaries are allowed, and so are sign language dictionaries. Dictionary needs to be available for all students during the English 1 and English 2 exam. So while paper and electronic dictionaries are permitted, there are stipulations for the electronic ones, and so in order to make sure that we don't have any type of mishaps with that, it's going to be solely paper dictionaries permitted for the testing on our campus. Calculators must be provided for Algebra 1 and Biology. As students complete the math and science EOCs, they should be provided a calculator. There are stipulations for how many for each student. There needs to be a graphing calculator for each student that takes the Algebra 1 exam. And there needs to be a calculator available for every 5 students taking the biology exam. These will be provided to students. The school calculators will be used. Students will be provided the calculator so that we ensure that incorrect calculators are not used. It's also important that these calculators are clear to factory default both before and after testing. These instructions on how to do so will be provided. Reference materials will be included in the test booklets for students, and they will be on perforated pages so that the students can remove them so they can use it during the test. They can be provided with scratch paper. Remember, all of this, the graph paper, the charts, scratch paper, need to be collected at the end of the test. So makeup tests are allowed for all subject assessments, and it needs to be taken by the student the day they return to the school. They'll follow the same testing procedures, and they should not have had any contact with the student that has taken the assessment. In order to take a makeup test, they need to be marked officially absent the day of the test. And for the EOC, we have 1 week to do the makeups. So EOCs may be administered during a testing window, and this year 3 of the EOCs are going to coincide with AP exams, so make sure that you plan accordingly. Again, Mela and I will get together to discuss how that schedule is going to look and send it to you as soon as possible. Reference materials for STAAR math and science assessments are included in the test booklets. Again, these are printed on perforated pages so that students can rip them out. You can also print the reference materials if you'd like, but we're just going to use the ones that are in the booklets. These materials need to be collected and turned in with all the other testing materials, and I will make sure that they are destroyed. All test materials will be issued using a materials control form and a 9-digit security number printed on the back of each booklet. They need to be checked out and check back in on the same day. Please, you'll return all of your assigned test materials to me after each test session, and we'll use the material control form to track the materials that you've checked in and out. After you verify that you received the correct number of test booklets, you're going to initial the out box for the appropriate day, and your initial signify that you received the test booklets assigned to you as recorded on the material control form, and that you have signed your security oath. This is important. Remember that actively monitoring means that your cell phone is turned off, computers are turned off, you're walking around and supervising students, not sitting at your desk. You're not reading books or magazines, no emailing or texting, and if you have any questions, refer to the section on monitoring testing. All answers need to be marked on an answer document with a number 2 pencil. Do not allow students to use mechanical pencils. Answers marked in non-scorable test booklet will not be scored, and test administrators are not allowed to require students to mark the answers in the test booklet and then transfer them to the answer document. So students can start immediately with the answer document. However, remember that you can remind them to mark the answers on the answer document. It would be terrible if they ran out of time and didn't have any of their answers on the answer key or in the scorable document. Students may use highlighters or colored pencils if they'd like. However, make sure they're not using that on the answer document. This is considered an optional test administration material, and it will require documentation. Some students are going to finish earlier than others, and if that's the case, they can quietly read a book. When they turn in their test materials, the test administrator must inspect the completed answer document and make sure that all answers are bubbled in. If this is not the case, the only thing you can say to the student is, you have not recorded all of your answers on the answer document. Please go back and mark your answers on it now. That's it. You cannot specifically tell them which question is not bubbled. You can't say, go back to number 3 and bubble it in, or, oh, you skipped this line right here, or anything like that. It needs to be read verbatim. At that point, you can give the students their testing materials to go and do that. Make sure again that you quickly scan the answer documents to verify that all responses are marked. Do not look at or comment answers though, and do not point out individually skipped test questions. Once the test session is complete, you must immediately return the test materials to me. And you want to make sure that you have signed an oath to affirm that they have complied with state assessment requirements. If needed, there might be some situations where I'll ask you to transcribe a student response. However, if that's the case, you'll receive special training on doing so. Please do not transcribe any student responses unless you receive the specific training and I tell you that this is something we're going to need from you. Test administrators cannot answer any questions related to the content of the test. If a student does ask a question that can be answered, simply say, I can't answer that for you, just do the best you can. Remember, you're not allowed to translate test questions or passages into another language except sign language. You can't rephrase or add information to questions or the prompt. You shouldn't discuss test questions at any time, and you shouldn't score test times or discuss with students how they performed. Remember, no copies of the essays or open-ended questions is permitted. For the written composition section, you cannot read the prompt out loud unless a student asks you to read it out loud. Again, you shouldn't discuss any of the student compositions or read them at any time. Remember, you're not allowed to assist a student with the written composition or open-ended items at any time. You can't elaborate on the prompt, give a student an opening or closing sentence, give students an outline for organizing the composition, give them information on how to develop their ideas, or translate the prompt into another language, again, unless it's sign language. This information is specific to mathematics grade 3. Some students will be receiving oral administration. If that's the case, they'll be in a small group room, and they'll be receiving that type of administration from somebody that's been trained in it. I'll reach out to you if you'll be handling oral administration. If a student needs to be moved from one room to another, this is possible as long as within the time limit, and again, the clock will stop for that. But it's important that test security is not breached, so answer documents need to be placed inside their test booklet. The test booklets need to be collected, and the student needs to be accompanied as they are moved to the new room. Students cannot carry their own test booklet to the new testing room. If this happens, a new seating chart needs to be created for the new room. Here's a summary of everything. It's essential that you read the test administrator manual. This will count as the training for the STAAR test. It's important that you complete the quiz and receive a 100% on it. Need you to sign a STAAR tax oath prior to handling any testing materials. I'll come by your classrooms on Friday to make sure receive your signatures. Must actively monitor students. You are responsible for all testing materials you receive, storing them in a locked room, and returning all materials. Making sure that the testing materials are properly accounted for at all times is a very, very big responsibility. If you do not follow testing procedures, it could affect a student's performance and scores, the school's rating, and your teacher certification employment. It is essential that you take testing days seriously and follow all the guidelines that are outlined in the manual. If you have any questions, either before, during, or after the testing administration, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to answer them. I'll provide you guys with the manuals. Make sure that you read the testing administrator manual so that you're prepared on testing day. This does not take the place of reading the appropriate manuals. It provides you with a lot of information that's not included in this PowerPoint.